Hello again, YouTube. My name is Bree, and in today's video, I am continuing this series that is probably going to go on for way too long, where I do a painting with a different palette in the same sketchbook. I have gone through pretty much all of my handmade or small brand paints at this point. I think I have one other one that I need to locate. That's just like 5 colors from an individual maker. But I would like to do that one too. I just wasn't in the mood for it quite yet. And I decided to get into the bigger brands. So I felt I had to start with Schmincke. Schmincke is like the first professional Western watercolor brand I purchased. And it was quite the leap. And while it's kind of bright now, I promise it's just because of the autofocus and reflections. It settles down during the actual painting process. I did get that fixed. I keep things in a very manual mode when I'm painting and let it do its own thing when I'm moving around a bunch. So yeah. Anyway, this Schmincke palette is entirely too large. Basically, I had started with Sakura Koi, and then I got Kurotake Gansai Tambi, and through, I think it was like Watercolor Snacks, like the Art Snacks watercolor one, they gave a small selection of Winsor Newton, and I realized that there was a huge difference in quality between like Sakura Koi and professional, and also a very different feel between Eastern and Western watercolor, or like the Gansai Tambi versus just like Winsor Newton. And that set I don't really consider my first set because it was just super random colors, like there was blues and greens. It was a moodier set, so it wasn't a fully usable on its own watercolor palette. And it didn't quite work out for me because it used a lot of granulated colors and color mixes. So it just, I got the Schmincke set and kind of, I'm pretty sure I gave away both the Sakura Koi, the Gansai Tambi, and the Winsor Newton ones, with a couple exceptions. So I no longer have those. But yeah, this palette I got on sale or on discount because it was a little scratched and dinged. So it came at the right moment where I could like just almost barely justify buying such an expensive paint palette because it was that much cheaper than it normally would be. And that was still at a time where I was in like the mindset of you need every color and didn't really understand color theory or mixing. Nowadays, I would definitely buy a smaller palette, like a split primary with maybe a couple convenience colors, over buying I can't imagine ever buying a palette this large ever again. But yeah, this palette is like my first big palette, so it's still very important to me, and I absolutely love Schmincke Watercolor. I actually did a painting last week for this series using this palette, and didn't have my camera settings fixed yet, so couldn't use that. So to make it different, I decided I would use a different set of paints. So I definitely don't use like all 48 paints in one go, and I do apologize because I did have to show it off in the beginning, but it's filthy. This palette, I didn't know back then that if like, the paint's sticking when you're peeling it, you can just stick it in the fridge. And yeah, so there's paper stuck to some of the ones, especially ones I don't use and never felt the need to fix. And yeah, I would use it all the time and leave it out to dry all the time. And then it would collect the dust and cat fur. I've learned a lot of lessons, and I need to one day figure out how to clean up this palette without using up too much paint in the process of just cleaning it. But anyway, so normally I would go with a basic split primary, and I say that, but especially when doing portraits, I rarely use a cool yellow. So normally I use a warm yellow, warm red, cool red, and at least one blue, usually an ultramarine, but sometimes also cool blue, like in this case, helio turquoise. But because I had just done a painting with this palette, using my normal colors plus my normal convenience brown, which I think is the Indian red. I have the list of colors and what they're called for Schmincke, but I know they've changed some of the names since I bought this palette, so it doesn't currently match up to some, like, I think there's at least 3 or 4 paints that don't match up to the names that they now have. But yeah, I decided to mix things up a little bit. So for my warm red, I've really grown to like warmer reds, and I wanted to really feature that. So this painting starts out really warm. And I decided to use cadmium red. I don't use cadmiums usually, and I feel I have to at some point because that's like part of the price point of this palette is all the cadmiums and cobalts that I don't use because I know you dilute it down a lot, so it's not like throwing out a bunch of paint where it would be bad for the environment, but I'm overly paranoid. So I just tend to put these paints aside and not really use them. I decided to use cadmium red today. I also used a little bit of cadmium yellow at the end. I think it's cadmium yellow light. I used the translucent yellow, which I think that one is one of the ones that had a name change, and I don't know what it is off the top of my head. Used not my normal, one of the carmines, I'm not sure which one, and then ultramarine because that's my go-to blue. And I jump between the warm blues so much that none of them are one I haven't really been using, so I love Delft blue as well. I love the blues in this palette. And yeah, then when I got to the browns, I started with my normal go-to Indian red and decided to mix things up a little bit and finally started pulling out the burnt umber and sepia just because I thought it worked well for the hair color, and I haven't used those in a really long time. And I think I pulled out a little yellow ochre at some point too. I don't remember. I definitely played a lot more in the earth pigments than I normally do, and I had fun with that. Part of the reason I wanted to paint this reference was because, and I do apologize, I have like no style sense, no fashion sense. I don't know hair colors at all. It's like brown, blonde, or red, and then people tell me I'm not blonde, it's light brown, and I can't tell the difference. I'm terrible about this, but I really liked her hair color, and I don't paint hair, whatever color it is, often or ever, so it was just something that like I really wanted to do. And I also love the structure of her face, which I'm not sure I captured well. But yeah, I really liked her face was a little longer. She has a really nice nose. Yeah, so that's, if I can find it again, because I saved the photo to my phone and then I don't think I kept the link up, but if I can find it again, I'll share it in the description in case anybody else wants to use it as a reference. It's from Paxils, I think. But yeah. So that's why I picked this particular reference and why I used the paints I used, the colors I used. For the actual outfit, it was pretty much all black in the reference photo, and I decided to try Payne's Gray. Now, I have a weird relationship with Schmincke Payne's Gray in that I don't really like how it flows on paper. It's like one of the paints that like I think everyone during this one era was obsessed with Payne's Gray. And I wanted to love it more than I actually did. I had Daniel Smith, and I didn't really like that. I didn't really understand that it was because granulation, and I didn't know how to work with granulation when I first started. And then I got this one, but the coloring is just almost like it can get a little greenish looking at times, and I don't love it, and I don't love the way it flows, and I didn't apply it well, so it got a little blotchy. And then just to go really off the rails for me, I used black paint. So I never used black watercolor. It was just one of those things in the beginning where they told you don't use black, never use black, and I went okay and lived by it. There's nothing wrong with using black. Use black, go to town, it doesn't matter, do what you want. The thing is with a lot of black is it does, if you're trying to do a lot of layers, it can muddy up the paint, and you mixing your own black, you couldn't really give it a lot more depth with warm and cool. But for something like this, it's fine. Live your best life. Do whatever you want. But yeah, I don't know. So yeah, my application here just wasn't good either. But nevertheless, it just always comes out a little patchy no matter how careful I am. At this point, like I didn't even care. I knew it wasn't going to come out right, and I go into correction mode so quickly now. It doesn't matter. But yeah, not my favorite Payne's Gray by any stretch. Otherwise, once again, love the palette. So, in terms of, yeah, I really don't know what to say. Like with each of these, I've been talking about kind of generals because I love like almost all of my paint palettes. The only thing is like beam paint, which I did in the last video, doesn't really work for the way I paint, but it's perfectly fine. The paints are great. It's just not, it doesn't work for me as I paint right now. In the same way, like the Gansai Tambi are absolutely wonderful paints, but it doesn't, because they're thicker, they're more opaque, they don't layer as well. So they, like, same thing, they don't work for me quite as well, but it doesn't matter. Like, they can absolutely work for someone else for different styles, for different techniques. So no real judgment of those paints. Same thing here. Like, this is my paint brand. If I know other people don't like it, because Schmincke does tend to be a little bit more on the opaque side, not like quite as much as those others, but enough where if you're not careful, you could easily muddy up your mixes. But for me, I've gotten used to using the pigments I use regularly, and I absolutely love them, so it doesn't affect me. Like, I know what to do and what to layer and kind of how to work with those paints, I don't run into issues. But yeah, I get it. A lot of people don't like Schmincke, and also they can be a little expensive, so understood. Yeah, I really don't have too much to say. I don't remember if I said it. I'm just really brain dead today. I've been doing a lot of chores and I am completely exhausted, so I don't even remember what I've been talking about or what I've said so far in this video. We're just kind of winging it. This is my makeup video, so it's all good. I mean, I know I don't have to do a makeup video. I just felt compelled to, because I don't know, I wanted to. But yeah, otherwise, yeah, okay, so at this point I'm using Quill poster color. I don't know when I put this on that little palette, but it seems to be lasting forever, so I keep using it for highlights. And then I think I go in and give her freckles, which I was about to make a comment on and realized that wasn't what I was doing. The freckles didn't really work out so well, and I think that's just partly using pigment I don't usually use, and it was either more staining, or with the paper it stained a little bit more, so they came out like really bold, which wasn't my intention. I meant for them to be a bit more subtle, but that's okay. Lesson learned. But yeah, that's pretty much all I got, and I don't want to go start rambling on a random other tangent. I just wanted to add a little something to the background. I thought I was going to do an actual background and just apply more paint when I got to it, but I didn't really have the time. So just did something simple, and that's it. So I hope you're all doing well and taking care of yourself. I think in the next video, maybe I'll bring out my Daniel Smith palette. That one has been a really long time. But yeah, we'll see. And then once I get through all of these palette tours, I'll come up with a completely different series, or just start doing some bigger pieces, because I am ready to do some larger pieces. Don't mind the putty, it's just to help hold the sketchbook in place so it doesn't keep getting punted all over the desk while I'm trying to paint. Yeah, so once again, take care, and I hope to maybe talk to you in a future video when I have more mental capacity and aren't rambling quite as much. So in the meantime, yeah, bye.